All right. I think we're live, which is awesome. And it's not live like this isn't like actually on YouTube. This is no one follows this channel. So this is just how I download this into an
State of the
MP3.
Union of the Pistons.
Yeah, this is our State of the Union. Well, I guess this is Inside the Cylinder. And I guess first and foremost, I do want to welcome back Joey Mack to the show because it's been a while. I think you were kind of on sabbatical, maybe like a religious retreat. I don't know, Joe, where you were just kind of getting your Zen proper. Like, could you just, say hello to the people? Because I'm sure they've missed you at this point.
Yeah, hey guys. Yeah, I was religiously drinking margaritas on the beaches of Miami for a week. And then unfortunately had to come back to Chicago to negative 20-degree weather last week. So that's basically it in terms of a personal update over here. But I feel good.
Are you rejuvenated from that? Like, did that put you in good hopes, or did it make coming back to Chicago even more difficult?
It made it easier. I think you need a break from the cold windy city in January or February. So it was worthwhile for sure.
All righty. And also special guest, first time guest, and longtime editor and writer at Detroit Bad Boys, Steve Hinson. Welcome to the show, Steve.
Thank you. It's good to be on. Good to, I always listen to the show. It's you guys do some really great work, so it's nice to join you.
Hell yeah. Well, I want to thank you. You edit a lot of my articles, so you make them sound as good as they possibly can. So I appreciate you making me look good, because that's that inflates my ego, which helps helps everyone.
Oh, we do what we can.
Well, so yeah, we are in the midst of a Pistons win streak. 2 games right now feels like a win streak to me. The Pistons are actually 7-6 in their last 13 games. Over their last few games, they blew that historic lead to the Clippers over the weekend. It was pretty much the low point of the season. They bounced back with a blowout victory over a Denver Nuggets squad who was shorthanded, but still a good win and a much-needed win. And then they came back tonight and had a solid win against a pretty bad Knicks team. So I guess, just to start it off, Steve, how do you feel right now, just in totality, just considering the last few games and where the Pistons are going to be going from here?
Oh, I mean, I think that on the whole, it's the big picture. This team sucks. It's not a good basketball team. Going and beating the Knicks, the Knicks have won. They're 10-42, and they are worse right now, probably after that Kristaps Porzingis trade, even though they brought in a couple of veterans in terms of DeAndre Jordan and Wes Matthews. But I mean, watching Jordan tonight, like, dude doesn't want to be there. And then the game against the Nuggets last night, it was, I don't know, it was just funny. It was like one of those nights where all of the shots are falling, but it's still, it takes more than a few of these games to, change the opinion that this is not a good basketball team right now.
That is completely fair. Joe, where are you at with all of this? Yeah, I guess where are you at?
Yeah, I mean,
perspective.
I would pretty much co-sign what Steve said, and this is just the standard Pistons as they've been over the last couple of seasons. Blew a 25-point lead to the Clippers, came back and beat the #1 team in the West, and then beat the Knicks, who I think that was their 14th loss in a row. So the Pistons somehow managed to beat really good teams. I'm not sure what to make of that, and then lose to bad teams, or blow big leads to decent teams. So there's not much of there's not much that I can take away from that. I think it's just the Pistons as we're used to, and that's the roller coaster ride, I suppose, that we're on.
Yeah, and I think with the Nuggets game, it was one of those games where it was so clear that they were due. These are NBA players. While the Pistons have been inconsistent, their shooters have been inconsistent over the course of the season. It literally, like, they get paid to play basketball. These guys aren't actually just completely broke. They can put the ball in the basket, and they eventually did it. So I think that was something where it was like, and especially after the way that they lost that game, they probably came together a little bit and had some sort of personal accountability. But the thing is with the Pistons that you always have to question is like, how can they sustain it? Not necessarily, even from like a game by game perspective, but like how can they sustain it within a game? And that's, really been the story for Detroit this whole season.
Well, Stanley Johnson had a 93% true shooting percentage in that Nuggets game, and I fully expect that to be sustained for the rest of the season.
I had a tweet that went out that said something like Stanley Johnson's best game of the season right before the trade deadline, and then it had a pretty classic Jack Nicklaus gif. So, yeah, no, I mean, I'm right on board with you. It's I think that was pretty much an outlier, at least for Stanley Johnson's case.
Yeah.
One thing that has been trending up though consistently over the last few games is Reggie Jackson's play. And prior to tonight's game, I don't have the box score pulled up in front of me, but I can look that up. I don't know if anybody else has it, but Reggie's last 6 games prior to the Knicks game, he's averaged 19 points. He's shooting 49% from the floor. 43% from 3. This is pretty crazy. 7.4 assists to 1 turnover, and he's a plus 10.6 net rating, which is the highest on the team. Is this, Steve, do you think this is fluff? Is this real? Like, what should we take away from Reggie Jackson's resurgence?
Well, I think that Reggie Jackson has been pretty maligned this season, and I'm not sure that he has really deserved it. I think he's played pretty solidly for the most part, especially shifting from the role of really being a center point of the offense to being kind of an off-ball, taking a lot of three-point shots and that sort of thing. He has always been a bit of a streaky player, and so I don't expect him to keep playing at the level that he is right now over the past stretch. But if we look at some of his advanced numbers, he's shooting a 53.4% true shooting percentage, and that's among the highest levels of his career so far. He's pretty much right at a solid starter as in terms of like win shares and stuff. I think that the idea of Reggie Jackson with where he's at in his career and with the number of injuries that he's had, that this role is really well suited for him, playing a little bit more off the ball and being a little bit less high usage of a player.
Yeah, I agree. He looked pretty good too, like with the ball in his hands. I saw a couple plays where he took the ball to the rack. He was actually utilizing his crossover. He wasn't just making one single move and then kicking it back out to Blake Griffin. So, seeing more and more of that is going to give me a little bit more hope. And I have been happy with his play. I think, the big question is with this whole team essentially is, the big three has produced, or the quote unquote big three has put up box score numbers, but they're not winning games. So, there is still like an underlying question there. Reggie Jackson did score 19 points. He chipped in 7 assists and had 2 rebounds tonight as well. So he's kind of right on pace with where he's been. Joe, what are your thoughts on Jackson's play so far, or are you still sold on the man?
Well, I think his conditioning's coming around, and Dwayne Casey mentioned the fact that it's going to take him possibly until the second half of this season to get to, full game speed. So I think that's definitely what we're seeing right now. He's getting more comfortable with the catch and shoot role. And then, I like utilizing him, as I've mentioned before, in that pick and roll with Andre. I think it utilizes both of their best skill sets. So doing that a couple times a game has certainly helped him. And, but ultimately the biggest problem with Reggie Jackson is his liability on defense. I'm not sure, it's getting a little bit better, and we're finding ways to hide him in the most efficient way possible. That being said, it is, it's promising to see his, consistency on offense, because we've had far too many games where it's just, Blake with 28 and then a couple guys, right around the 10 to 14 range without, a solid second option on offense. So I think he's really, solidifying himself as our go-to second scorer on a game-to-game basis. So hopefully it's a situation where that raises his trade value, in my opinion, and we can get something in return for him. But I guess we'll hop into that a little bit later.
Yeah. So, I mean, before we do get into that sort of trade speculation talk, I do want to talk a little bit more about kind of the Pistons strategy that we've heard from the front office, specifically not just the front office, but actually kind of negating what the front office said, because Ed Stefanski said that they were in a hold, pattern a couple weeks ago when he was on one of the Pistons official podcasts. But now Gores had come out and said on the record that the Pistons are buyers and that he would gladly go into the tax if it means that the Pistons are winning games. Now, I don't know how many vodka sodas or gin and tonics he had at that point. It's kind of hard to tell with the man, but actually it's not hard to tell because he's not a stoic drunk. Like, he is straight up having a blast, and I don't blame him. He's a billionaire. But that's besides the point. So let's just talk about that for a little bit. Joey, what are your thoughts? Did you hear those comments, or did you see those comments floating around that he considers them to be buyers and he wants to go into the tax if he's bringing in that type of guy? That scared the living daylight out of me. I don't know what it did to you.
It scares me, but that's also just always been his mentality, which I like, because he's not a super conservative owner, and there are a lot of those types of owners out there. That being said, I don't think he makes the best executive decisions, roster-wise, specifically with the comments that he made about, or specifically what we heard regarding him blocking possible or real trades for Andre last year. So I do question his decision-making, but I do like the fact that he's an aggressive owner and he wants to win.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's coming from a good place, and I like that the guy's not just a cheap. He's clearly putting in the dollars for this team. They still, I think, at least coming into the year, they had a top 10 payroll. I'm almost positive. I think they were 10th, but I could be wrong about that. Steve, what are your thoughts just when you heard that kind of mentality coming from him?
I don't really disagree with them about the idea of that the team should be looking to win. When you've got Blake Griffin in a very weak Eastern Conference, you probably should be trying to win. In terms of, do I think he has a proper understanding about what it takes to win? Joe, you just brought up the trade, the nixing the trades. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, let's get into that.
Yeah. So I wrote the piece yesterday, I think it was, about the Tom Gores and Ed Stefanski, that this trade deadline is going to, have them realize it's going to show whether or not they get it for this team, whether or not they really have a good understanding about how this team looks if it wins. And usually whenever I try writing anything, I try keeping it very facts-based and avoiding any speculation. But there was a paragraph that after I was rereading it, I'm like, no, I got to delete this because it was going a little bit too far into a rabbit hole when it comes to Tom Gores, that I'm a bit worried about it, because, when it comes to this type of rumor from sources or whatever, you take it for what it is, that maybe it's true, maybe it's not, probably not, but a lot of it adds up with Gores in terms of his relationship with Andre Drummond. And so I was just wondering, man, if it's true that he did nix these Andre Drummond trades, and then what we've got is an owner who is bringing on very intelligent people, like Stan Van Gundy's a smart guy. Jeff Bauer, he's an intelligent guy. I think that Stan Van Gundy knew that the whole Andre Drummond post-up experiment, he saw 7 points per possession and knew that was not a good play. I don't think that Stan Van Gundy ever encouraged that. And so what I'm concerned about is that that Jeff Bauer and Stan Van Gundy tried to trade Andre Drummond and ended up fired for it, and that Tom Gores brought Ed Stefanski on to be his yes man, and that Tom Gores' yeses are extremely emotionally driven, if we want to put it that way. That he's buddies with this NBA player, and you can't win in the NBA with an owner like that anymore. And so that's the rabbit hole. So I had to back out of that. But, from a personal sense, I'm concerned that might actually be the case.
Well, I'm asking you from a personal sense. We want the
right.
we want the uncut Steve. So
yeah, exactly. That's the point of podcast, right?
Exactly. And one thing that, I mean, one of the takeaways, I don't know when the news came out, but I remember they had a win a couple games ago. I don't remember even which game it was, but Andre Drummond had a pretty monster game. And Tom Gores was hammered at the LCA, and then he like barged into the post game interview on court with Andre Drummond and was like trying to give dap and like hug and like did like a thing, and Andre gave him this kind of endearing look, which I appreciated. It was like, oh man, it's like kind of like telling your drunk friend to go to bed type of look. At least that's what I took away from it. And but I think that really does stand to your point of it. He loves Andre Drummond. You know, I mean, that was his guy, right? That was the first max contract. That was like the biggest player on the Pistons prior to Blake Griffin. One thing I would love to know about the rumors that were dropped about the nixing of these trades for Andre Drummond is, when did they happen? Did they happen before the Blake Griffin trade? Like, I assume so, right? Because although Blake Griffin's trade was a bit earlier compared to the NBA trade deadline, so they could have had another move down the road. And also, I would love to know who was agreed for. Like, how mad should I be? Like, I know how mad you are, Steve, but like, I don't know how mad I am. Like, I would love to see who they had in line, because, you know, you can always, at least in your head, play a little mental chess and put a player next to Blake Griffin and kind of see what that team might look like, at least from on paper, and, you know, just seeing how they've played in the past. So that's the biggest questions that I have. Joe, do you have anything on that, on the tied, over emotionally driven Tom Gores? Because I think that could be a possible scenario here. I think Steve's not necessarily shooting from the hip when he says that.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly think that he tries to puppeteer things a bit more than he probably should. And a lot of what gets in the way is his relationship with the players. I think he kind of tries to play like cool dad sometimes. Like he had like the weird, awkward, drunken hug thing post-game interview with Blake Griffin after his first game with the Pistons last year. So I think he really like wants to be liked by these players, especially, you know, the better players, and that relationship, could possibly be impacting transactions that take place. So if it affects the product on the court, I'm not down for it, but you can't be totally against an owner having a good relationship with the players, because it does make them feel comfortable. You just don't want them to get too comfortable if they're playing below their capabilities. That's pretty much it, man. Right. Although I do think that, it's contradictory to think that he would put us into buy now mode while also refusing to trade one of our better trade assets in Andre Drummond. That's something that like totally doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it depends on what that package is, though, right? Like, if that package was for like a clearly like Brook Lopez salary, like expiring contract, not Brook Lopez, but like Robin Lopez expiring contracts. Although Robin might be a better fit, it's not the sexy move, right? Like, it's not the Blake Griffin trade, right? Like, it's something where it might help your team win. I'm sure Stan Van Gundy thought it would help the team win, because he knows that he was coaching for his own position. But it might not have been that type of, you know, if you're sending out the max guy or like the star on your team, the 2-time All-Star, the optics of that trade might look more like you're selling than buying, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I agree. I think that's one of the big things when it comes to the idea of buying versus selling, is in the Eastern Conference right now. I think the biggest key for it is fit. That when we look at the Eastern Conference standings, let me make sure that I'm actually correct about this right now. But yeah, you've got Milwaukee, Toronto, and Indiana ahead of Philly and Boston. Philly and Boston should be considered more talented than those three teams in terms, when you talk about a pure talent or name recognition standpoint. Boston's the team that has Kyrie, Gordon Hayward. They're the ones. In Philly, they've got 3 stars. But the teams that fit together are the teams that are winning. And so my take on the way that the Pistons need to go is to be focusing on fit rather than, just focusing on accumulating talent. We've been doing that for years now, and it's not moved the needle at all. You see these incremental upgrades at positions, whether you go from Brandon Jennings to Reggie Jackson, or from Ersan Ilyasova to Tobias Harris to Blake Griffin, and none of those things have done anything to improve the team whatsoever. And so, just continuing along that same path, that ain't it. That would be considered the buying route, but that's not going to move the needle for the Pistons. They need to be focusing on fit.
Okay, so let me ask this question. It might be kind of, I don't know, muddying the water of your description, but I think your description is on point. So if you want to keep going down that highway, please do. But Joe, let me ask you then. Do you think, should Detroit be buyers? And when I say buyers in this sense, I mean we'll talk more about the particular players, but bringing in a guy that's on a big contract now that has that name recognition, that is in the vein of the Blake Griffin type of trade, where you're like trying to have like a quote unquote big three to kind of push forward. Should they be sellers? Should they be looking to move Reggie Bullock, Stanley Johnson, Ish Smith, like the guys that they can actually probably get out the door and acquire some assets? Or do you think right now they should just stand pat, looking at their upcoming schedule, knowing that the Heat and the Hornets and even the Brooklyn Nets aren't necessarily a lock for the playoffs at this point, and they're on a couple game win streak and have a nice favorable schedule coming up, and just keep that team together right now? Joe, what do you think the Pistons should be doing?
Well, I don't think they should totally be sellers, because you have Blake Griffin locked in for this foreseeable future. Doesn't look like he's going anywhere. So you have this window in which you want to win, and we're not going to completely rebuild around a 30-year-old who's making a hell of a lot of money. So I just don't really think there's a scenario in which we can completely break it down. I am not opposed to being buyers and adding another big contract and having a big three because of that window. If it matches up with the years in which we have Blake Griffin and Andre Drummond, I'm down to say, screw it. Let's see if we can be as good as we can be in the next 3 years. Even if the ceiling of that is, I don't know what the ceiling of that is, 5 seed, hopefully. I've said that many times. But I'm okay with that. I also think there's a world in which we could play addition by subtraction. And I guess when I mentioned being buyers by potentially moving Andre, I think that does allude to fit and trading Andre away, because he doesn't fit very well next to Blake Griffin. And I think that you can get a player with less ability who fits this roster better and can help us win this year and next year within that trade. All of that being said, I know this is a bit long-winded, but all of that being said, I'm okay with getting rid of Reggie Bullock and Stanley Johnson for draft picks as well. I think that I think that it's really a matter of what offers on the table. So depending on which direction we go, as well as we do it right, I might be okay with either three of those scenarios.
All right, that makes sense. And yeah, I get what you're saying from that perspective. Steve, do you want to add to that, or just kind of? It sounds like you and Joe might agree a little bit on that sort of. Hey, let's just go for fit, and I think that's going to be what makes this team win. You can do that without having, and we can just say it. If you want to trade Andre Drummond, let's get into that.
Yeah, for sure. And, I totally agree with everything that Joe said. I think that one of the keys that the front office does need to figure out is where it is that what the plan is this summer, if and what it is that you're going to do. If you're going to keep Andre Drummond around and Blake Griffin around, maybe they've got some maybe they have some way that they can make it work. I don't know. But also, if you are going to do that, and then that Reggie, you can't keep Reggie Bullock next year, and so you've got to trade him. Otherwise, you're holding on to him for whatever playoff push this year is to be, let's say the Pistons make the playoffs this year. Okay, that's great, but they might set I wonder what the league record is for the worst team that's ever made the playoffs is. Like, what's the fewest number of wins that a team has made like a 6 seed with?
We're going to be approaching that this year for sure.
Yeah. So if we let's say we make a 6 seed and we have 38 wins, that's not worth keeping Reggie Bullock for. And so I love Reggie, but if we're not re-signing him, and then they need to be moving him. We saw Rodney Hood go to the Blazers for, what was it, Nick Stauskas, Wade Baldwin, and a second-round pick, or 2 second-round picks, or something.
I think it was 2 second-round picks. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean that's a great package for Rodney Hood, who's a pretty crappy player, and Reggie Bullock's legitimately good. So the return that Bullock would fetch is something that they should absolutely be pursuing. The opportunity cost is too high for them to turn that down. Ish Smith, if we aren't bringing him back, let him go. Stanley Johnson, if you can get anything for him, do it. I've always been a believer and a hoper for Stanley Johnson, but he's not been an NBA caliber player. So, I mean, if whatever you can get for Johnson's is a coup. So, yeah. But also at the same time, over the summer, if you're going to move Andre Drummond for cap space, and then maybe you go a different direction, but they need to figure out what it is what the future of this team looks like.
Yeah, I mean, for Stanley Johnson, Steve edited it, and I wrote the end of the Stanley Johnson era article on Detroit Bad Boys last week, where it was kind of more of a narrative about his entire career and his pedigree coming into college and into the draft, and the Pistons kind of drafting him off of that. But not only for the Pistons, but for Stanley, I think he needs a fresh start. I don't think that he's not I think all of us are in the same boat where none of us dislike players as humans. Like, we don't know these people. Like, this is just something where it doesn't make sense for the team to keep him, and he also looks like he definitely needs a fresh start somewhere else. So I think Stanley, when he gets on the floor now, you never know if that's even going to be a prolonged stint, because usually he gets like that first crack at it, and if he's playing like garbage, then he doesn't get out there sometimes for that second stint. So I think if you have a player that's that shaky and they haven't been able to define a role for him over the course of 2 head coaches in 3.5 years in the league, then I think you got to give somebody else a shot at it. And I do believe that Stanley's pedigree, his physicality, his just the fact that he was a lotto pick, like there's teams and coaches out there and GMs who think that they are the wizards that are going to be able to turn this guy around. So I think that they could be able to get at least a second-round pick for him, and maybe a journeyman that might be able to help this team now, even if it's just a little bit. So that's where I'm at with the Stanley Johnson thing. I do want to go on record, at least for Drummond, trading him trade deadline, and kind of just in totality about Drummond. I'm not there right now to trade Andre Drummond. And I think the biggest reason for me is there are times where, you look at that third quarter against the Denver Nuggets where that was Andre Drummond. Like, he was the reason that they kept their heads above water. He was the one that didn't allow a run to go on. He was pretty much producing a lot of his offense off the offensive glass. I know that some of that is it's not, the metrics don't necessarily add up to that being the most important type of play set, but with the way that the Pistons are generating looks for their shooters, the amount of open looks that they get from 3, I think they're top 7 and top 5 in wide open looks from 3, and they are the same for open looks from 3 throughout the course of this season. So I think that they're generating a lot of good looks. And yes, Andre Drummond might be a black hole when it comes to the post, and I don't think he's ever going to turn into that rim runner that we want him to be. But at the same time, like, I don't want to put most of the offensive blame on him. I think most of it has to do with just the pure just awfulness that we've seen out of Detroit's wings in their inconsistency. So I don't know if anybody has a rebuttal to that, or I mean, I'm sure Steve does.
Oh, I do. But yeah, Joe, you haven't gotten a chance to chime in a bit. So if you have any thoughts.
I think that I've come to my personal conclusion with Andre Drummond. It's a lack of consistency that seriously concerns me. not only on a game-to-game basis, but a quarter-to-quarter basis and a possession-to-possession basis. And he's 25 years old now. He has a max contract. It's one of those things that you would expect a player to figure out by this point, or it's kind of a written book. And that's where I'm at. I don't think he's a bad player. I'm by no means an Andre hater, but I would kind of parallel it to what you said about Stanley Johnson, David. I think that possibly he'd go to another team and get a fresh start, and I don't know, find some more consistency with somebody else. But just for me, as a fan who's watched him over the course of the last 7 seasons, I just don't expect anything to happen with him on this team to really take us to any sort of next level. So I think that for me, we need to turn the page in terms of the era and the culture of Reggie Jackson, Andre Drummond, Stanley Johnson, that core of guys, just from like a mentality standpoint. And I think that's what we would really, that's what would begin if we got rid of him. So I don't think you necessarily get rid of him for pennies on the dollar. But losing that contract and opening up a better fit in our starting roster, I think would be just a huge plus for this team.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been there. I've been there for a little while now, and it's not to take away from the value that Andre Drummond does bring to the court. There are those flashes where he's absolutely dominant. There are some things that he does on the court that nobody else can do, and there were some plays he made today that that are just legitimately impressive plays. And I think this year, by and large, he's been pretty good in a lot of points. He's had some down stretches, but he's had some games where he has really been excellent. But at the end of the day, also, the last team to actually have an above average offense with 2 big men taking the majority of taking the 2 highest. Let me rephrase that. Sorry. The last team to have an above average offense that had their 2 leading shot attempt guys as big men were the old Tim Duncan and David Robinson Spurs. It's been like 20 years. There's a reason why.
Hall of Famers.
What's that? Yeah,
I said, and 2 Hall of Famers.
2 Hall of Famers. Neither one of them were a guy who was a 51% true shooting percentage guy who turned the ball over 2.5 times a game without creating for his teammates. And, it's not about hating on Andre Drummond, but it is that this structure of team doesn't work. They do get a lot of open looks for 3. I know that the numbers say that, but when we look at what those shots look like, a lot of times, it is kicking the ball to the corner, swinging around the perimeter, and it's a guy just rushing the shot off before the closeout gets there. There's a reason why they're dead last in 3-point percentage, and it's not because these are quality open looks. A lot of times when we're seeing teams generating, really good looks from 3, it comes from a good balanced offense, and that typically means that you may have a big guy and a little guy who are both doing a lot of the work on the offensive side, not 2 guys who are backing it down and then flinging it out to the perimeter, flinging it around the horn. And that's such a predictable offense to defend that even if those, wide open look numbers look good, it's not a good offense,
So it all ultimately pretty much comes down to the lack of fit for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think Andre Drummond's style of game is a winning style, but it's beyond just not liking the way that Andre Drummond plays. That I don't think that you can win with 2 big men being your 2 leading shot attempt guys.
I guess where I'm at with this, just from a high level perspective, is I think what Joe said earlier, the Pistons, I think under the Blake Griffin era, that even if they hit as much as possible and they have a little bit better of a fit at center, I still think that this team's going to be maxing out at around that 5 seed. And I don't necessarily think that I think more critical on the inability to hit some of these open shots. I mean, I think that I think Laz has been posting the shot totals for pretty much all of the Pistons wings recently on Twitter, and you're seeing like 0 for 6, 1 for 5, 1 for 4, and like 2 for 3, and from Bullock and Kennard and Galloway,
Bruce Brown.
and Bruce Brown, who's kind of out there just more so to defend. But I am a little more critical that I don't think these shots are as bad. They are predictable, and I think when it comes to playoff time, that this is going to be they're just going to take into the woodshed. Like they're talking about how James Harden is predictable with his style of offense. It's like you want to see predictability, you put on a Detroit Pistons game because that shit is damn near unwatchable. But I watch it. So I don't know. I mean, that's where I'm at, is that I do think that there is some, but the question then is cap space. So I don't want to beat a dead horse here. But no, I mean, I see where you both are coming from. I was on the fence. I was almost there, but then I don't know. I am just been a bit more critical on the Wings production and, keeping Drummond. But I do think, and Laz and Ben kind of convinced me of this the last time I was on the Detroit Bad Boys podcast, that if you are going to move Andre Drummond, that probably the trade deadline might not be your best bet, because the value might not be as high right now. And with teams eventually swinging and missing in free agency, that there's going to be people who see the numbers, see the production, see the 2-time All-Star, see the name recognition, and might offer you a better package come the off season. Steve, do you think that there's any validity to that, or are you more so you want to see a trade in the next, 2 days?
Either way, I do think that there's a lot of validity to that point, that there's so many teams who are loading up on cap space that are just going to be left empty-handed, that the idea of landing an Andre Drummond could be a nice, like the Knicks are the perfect example. They're loading, they gave away Kristaps Porzingis to be able to go all in on this summer. And so if they miss on Durant, if they miss on Irving, and they end up with Kemba Walker and the idea of replacing the cap space that they got rid of in Tim Hardaway Jr. and Courtney Lee with some new permutation of Tim Hardaway Jr. and Courtney Lee. And then if we can say, hey, we'll get you Andre Drummond for, I don't know, like Frank, however you pronounce his last name. Ntilikina, yeah. Yeah, sure. You get off his books, and then you might get a developmental point guard. But, I think there's definitely validity there. But it's like we were talking about earlier, I think that it's figuring out what direction that you want to go. I think there are some trades at the deadline that would make a lot of sense, whether it's taking advantage of the Washington Wizards.
Yeah, let's wait to go into the players. I want that to be cool. Next year.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I'll turn it back over your way.
All right, Joe. Anything on that? Do you think that they should be looking to moving him now, or do you think that you're cool with just kind of waiting and see what you can get in the summer?
Yeah, I mean, I think they should be looking to move him now. I don't think the return will be as good as what it could be over the summer. I mean, Andre is kind of a complicated case of a very talented player who I think teams would need to research a little bit more, as opposed to just pulling the trigger in the course of a couple of days on a trade, and the cap space is definitely a factor as well. So I think it makes the most sense for opposing teams to trade for him over the summer, but I don't see any reason not to check out his trade value right now.
See what the offers you can get.
Yeah.
All right. Well, before we get into our next segment, which we're going to talk a little bit more about particular players that have been tied to the organization, and maybe some more speculative type of trades. Just a quick word from our sponsor. All right, and we're back. Anything fun on that break, guys? What'd we do? I got a fresh breath of air.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Pretty much it.
All right. Well, so as I said, we want to talk a little bit more about players that are tied to the organization. But one thing I do want to kind of put a nail in the coffin is to the players that are no longer available. And Dennis Smith Jr. Dennis Smith Jr. was, he was floated around for quite a bit there, but he has been moved to New York, as we saw tonight in the game, and actually had a great game until the fourth quarter. And then most likely the rumblings that have picked up a lot of steam in the past 5 hours or so is that Marcus Saul looks like he's going to be moving to Charlotte here soon. So it's very unlikely that the Pistons are going to be kind of re-engaging any of those types of Marcus Saul conversations that we had heard about last week. Now, one player that is tied to Detroit, and the one that definitely has the most steam right now, has been reported by James Edwards over at The Athletic. It's been reported by other guys as well, is Mike Conley. Now, I did just want to note that it's also been floated that Utah offered up Rubio and a pick for Conley. So what I read is that most likely if Detroit wanted to get the deal done, they would have to offer Reggie Jackson, who has 2 years remaining, well, counting this year, John Lure for the money to work, a pick, and Luke Kennard to make it work. Joey Mack, you put your head down, so I'm just going to ask you yes or no to that trade.
Well, I had to cough real quick, but yeah, I'll say yes to that trade.
Oh, wow. I was not expecting that. Can you explain why?
Really? Well, so John Lure's gone, Reggie Jackson's gone. Is it a protected pick, or are we just?
I doubt that you'd be able to protect that pick because at that point you probably make the playoffs, or you're going to be somewhere in the low, lottery to middle of the first round anyway. So I don't think they'll protect that.
Okay. Well, it's not a really deep draft class in general. So
Kennard, though, you're punting on Kennard.
Yes. So I mean, so you're trading Kennard and a decent draft pick for a 31-year-old Mike Conley, and how many years are left on his contract?
He is through 2021.
I mean, yeah, that works for my Blake Griffin timeline. So I don't see why you just don't put together a big old 3-headed monster and see what you can get out of it over the next 3 years or so.
What do you say, Steve? What would you say to that deal if that was put on your desk?
No, it depends. It depends in terms of what the larger direction of the organization is. Mike Conley, he would certainly make the Pistons better. But the key is how much better would he make them? This team is, they're second to last in true shooting percentage. They're 25th in the league in offense rating. They, we know about all that stuff.
So sad.
I know.
Bad. We're the second worst 3-point shooting too.
Yeah, we're 3-point shooting team in the league, and and so how far is Mike Conley going to move those needles? And so Mike Conley is he's like a 56% true shooting percentage guy as an upgrade over Reggie Jackson's 54%. He runs he's a really good floor general. I've always loved the way Mike Conley runs the game, but also when he is put in a position where he's playing next to Blake Griffin, I mean, he's not going to be running the game in the same way that he has in Memphis. So, is the uptick from what Reggie Jackson's like 24-25% assist percentage guy to Mike Conley, who's probably 9 or 10 percentage points higher, where's that going to put you? So does that mean that the Pistons are, instead of a 23-29 team, what does that get you? 3 or 4 extra wins and turn you into a 26-26 team? And if you're locked into the contracts of Griffin, Conley, and Drummond long term, I don't. That could be kind of, that could be kind of bad. But I think it's got to be. I don't think that just trying to move the needle at one particular position is enough to do it. I think they've got to refigure this whole thing and take a look at what does this team look like as not being a bottom 5 in the league in true shooting percentage, being a good offensive team look like. And go that direction. And Mike Conley could be a part of that, but him alone is not going to cut it. The whole thing with the Marc Gasol, I'm looking at the offer that they're talking about Marc Gasol for. What is it? Malik Monk, a first-round pick, and an expiring contract. Oh
I
my
knew
gosh.
that's what it was going to be. That's what I said. And Batum, I assume, to make the money work.
Well,
it's not expiring, though. So it's like expiring down the road.
Yeah, because I mean, if you're taking on the Batum contract, and then that's a whole nother story. Like, that's a different kind of headline there. But I mean, if that's the type of return that Marc Gasol's fetching, I mean, Detroit could. I mean, I would think that Andre Drummond would be more attractive to the Hornets than Marc Gasol is, and that's quite a package that Gasol's demanding there.
Yeah, no, I was, I think that was what my point was, or not my point, but what I had talked about before was I like the Marc Gasol fit a little bit more next to Blake Griffin. I think that made more sense from like a spatial, sense from, Marc Gasol was a former defensive player of the year. So he's not like just a chair out there. Either is Drummond. So I'm not trying to say that about Drummond, but I'm just saying you're not losing a ton in your rim protection. You might actually be getting more of an uptick. But it does sound so. Are you seeing? And sorry, I'm not live right now. But what are you seeing right now? Is this something that's like, oh, they're going back and forth, or does it sound like this is done?
It sounds like they're. Also, I saw a tweet that said that they were not playing Marc Gasol tonight because of the seriousness of the negotiation. So it sounds like it's. I mean, to me, that seems like it's a pretty advanced conversation, but.
Yeah, I saw that they had like a garbage bag next to his locker for him to like put stuff in, and that they took off his number from his locker. So
that's super shitty.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's what it's the NBA, man. I don't know. But let me ask you a follow-up question. I know this is really speculative, but let's say that the Pistons, hypothetically in this scenario, traded for Mike Conley and moved Andre Drummond in the summer. Would you then be on board with this? Because you might open up. Okay, I just wanted to see just if you, because I know you were saying what are they going to do? What is what would your next move be essentially? I am concerned about Conley. I'm not going to lie. So he missed 26 games in 2015, 2016. In 2016, 2017, he missed 10 games with a back injury. But everybody he like broke his back, and everybody thought he was going to be out for more time. So I don't know how. I'm not a doctor. I don't know really anything when it comes to medical injuries or things like that. So I don't want to speak too much on that. But in 2017-18, he did miss 70 games with an Achilles injury. Now he has bounced back. I think he's shooting 37.5 from three. He's putting up 20 points per game this season. But that coupled with the amount of money that he's due, $32 million next season. In 2021, he's owed $34 million. So that means if this proposed trade team as is, Andre Blake and Conley next season are making $96 million, and the season after that, they're making a combined $100 million. And that, for me, gives me a lot of pause because, in this situation, you're trading away Kennard, you're not re-signing Bullock, and I think you're just kind of running into the exact same problems that we've seen with this team before, and that Conley's not the type of guy that can kind of fill in those holes.
Oh, wait, so what's the idea with Luke Kennard being part of that package too, Conley?
Yes. I mean, I'm just speculating based on the fact that Rubio and a pick for Conley didn't work. Yeah. So Jackson plus a pick, I assume probably won't be enough. So I assume that they'd want a sweetener in Kennard, and that Bruce Brown isn't the type of guy that's going to move the needle.
Yeah, and Kennard is, that's where kind of I draw the line for it. Just because, I mean, I like Mike Conley. He is a good player. And if we're talking Jackson, Lure, and a pick, I don't think we're really going to miss any of those pieces. But Luke Kennard, I think we would. And so that would be a space I would not be willing to get into for those issues that you mentioned.
All right. Well, I agree. I don't think the Pistons should be looking to bring in Mike Conley. To be honest, I'd be devastated. And honestly, I think the Detroit Bad Boys group chat would be devastated as well. That seems to be our collective thought. I haven't seen too many people in there that have been pro Conley. So,
well, I'm going to say hype about it just in case it happens.
We were also getting hype. We were getting hype, Joe, about John Wall.
I know. I was going to say you learned your lesson. You learned your lesson.
I learned my
went
lesson.
down.
You were getting hyped too. What are you talking about?
No, I'm saying you learned your lesson because you were
Ah,
on board with trading for John
okay.
Wall, and then all of this happened, and he, slipped in his house and is out for the next year.
Oh man,
and I didn't.
You guys might want to delete those episodes.
Yeah, that was like a really low point for us. Like a really high point emotionally. It was strange.
Yeah, we were getting hyped up. Like, it's all good. I'm gonna own that, but I have went on record and said that was silly of us. But so all right, so we're done with like all of the major trades that I've seen the Pistons tied to. That's really the only one. I know that the Lakers are interested in Reggie Bullock. I've seen that out there, but are there any hypothetical trades anybody wants to bring to the table that might make this team better, in the now, in the future? Anything that anybody has?
Want to go first, Joe?
No, I don't really have my trade machine up, so
okay. All right. Yeah, so I was doing some thinking about it earlier, and now I'm completely thrown off just because of this Marc Gasol stuff with Charlotte, just because Charlotte was one of I had three teams that I was looking at that made a lot of sense for Detroit: Dallas, Charlotte, and whichever team misses out on their free agents over the summer. Okay. And so Charlotte, I still think, I think that they would take Andre Drummond over Marc Gasol just because of his pick and roll threat with Kemba Walker. I think he would be a more attractive person to come, to get Kemba to re-sign there. And also, if Kemba walks over the summer, who's going to be more attractive to rebuilding a team around, Marc Gasol or Andre Drummond? But we'll see. I guess that one, that ship might have sailed. I'll replace them with Washington. So Dallas, I think that Dallas is a team that would actually really enjoy having Andre Drummond as part of it. Like Luka Doncic and Kristaps Porzingis, of course, makes a ton of sense and should be a really great fit for a long time to come. But if Kristaps, he doesn't rebound, he's not going to be mixing it up down low. And so if you put Andre Drummond in that mix, and then you've got a pretty great horn set right there, right? So and also I think that Dallas has some pieces that would be really interesting to the Pistons. Mostly they'd be able to offer some expiring contracts over the summer, and I'm a big Jalen Brunson fan, so I'd be trying to get him involved too. So let's see, you can make it something like Dwight Powell, Jalen Brunson, and then another guy in there to make the salaries match. Maybe who else do they have? I don't even know what their contracts look like this summer, but they've got a lot of bigger contracts that are expiring that you can make it work. Or if you really like Harrison Barnes, and then fine, go after Harrison Barnes. I'm not a big Harrison Barnes fan, but he does do some things that would be a breath of fresh air for the Pistons at the small forward position, namely actually being able to make 3-point shots.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, the other two, Washington Wizards, I think that Otto Porter for Andre Drummond is always something that they would be down for. Whoever misses out on Drummond is going to have a ton of cap space to be able to give away. And, I don't think that just trading Drummond for cap space is necessarily the best way to go, because we're just going to, sign some new guys like John Lure and Langston Galloway with that cap space. But there are some really interesting point guards in this free agency that could be nice to have some availability to go after.
Darren Collinson being one of those guys that might not have a suitor for him, or probably will, but he might be a guy that's gettable, right?
Yeah, Collinson's great. Quinn Cook is my guy. I've been a big Quinn Cook fan ever since he was in the G League.
We're very pro Quinn Cook on this podcast.
We met him over the summer. He was it was cool. And we are very pro Quinn Cook as well. Yeah, we went on record about that. So I actually had a trade that was kind of drafted up sort of in the vein of the Mike Conley deal, which looks like this for Otto Porter Jr. It would be keeping Andre Drummond, but you'd be moving Stanley Johnson, who there might be something there that they want to see if they can get anything out of him. Galloway to make the money work and get a little bit of money off your books. John Lure and Kennard and a pick. for Otto Porter Jr. Now, Otto Porter Jr.'s contract isn't the most friendly thing, but he is a 40% three-point shooter for his career. His number's down a little bit this year at 37%. He doesn't really seem to fit in Washington for some reason. They don't seem to go to him as much as they possibly should. I think that he could be a lot better. And then also in this hypothetical scenario, you are addressing like the small forward position in Detroit, in my opinion, is probably the weakest position. I don't think, Reggie Bullock is the 3, but he's more of a 2. And I think that if you could actually slide in Otto Porter at the 3, that could actually address a lot of your concerns. And then you don't have to worry too much about, obviously Stanley Johnson's gone in this situation. Glenn Robinson the 3rd, he's been completely awful this whole season. So that's a trade that, I'm not as high on Luke Kennard as I have been. And I don't know if that's just a recency bias thing, but that's a trade that might be doable because they get an asset, a look at an asset, if you consider Stanley Johnson that, and a pick. And Washington should be in just rebuild mode at this point. So I don't know. That's one that I wouldn't be sick about that one personally. And he's younger, right? That you have him under contract. There are some benefits here compared to the Mike Conley situation, who's making a boatload more money and has all those injury concerns.
Definitely better in the Conley trade.
Okay. Yeah, nice. I think Otto Porter is exactly what this team is lacking in terms of a wing shooter, can kind of make some plays. He's young. And so I think that would be more than ideal in a trade.
All right. Well,
my concern with it is that the issue with Otto Porter over in Washington has been similar to the issue as Victor Oladipo in Oklahoma City, in terms that he's getting buried behind more established players. And so coming over to Detroit, I think that issue would only be amplified. And so he'd be a efficient small forward, which they absolutely need. But he would be a very low usage guy with a really high price tag. So I love the idea of getting Otto Porter here, but I think that it's got to come alongside getting the ball out of some of these other very ball dominant players' hands. Y'all know what I'm talking about in that, but
of course. So this would be one of those like, hey, if you're able to do something in the future to address player A, then that would be something that you would find favorable.
Yeah, for sure. And that's my, comes a lot with the perspective that I have for it. But in terms of a idea of a upgrade at a position that, could really use a lot of help, that I could see it working, it's one that it could be possible. I just, I'm doubtful that Otto Porter would really realize its full potential here with the team as it's constructed. But, it could be the thing. It could help the team, It could work.
It could. I guess I'm not. I just made that for the sake of this this segment of the podcast. He's due $27 million next year and $28 million the year after that. That's a lot of money for a guy that's averaging 13 points per game for his career. I don't really care how well you shoot from 3. I think that's definitely an overpay. So I don't know. I mean, it really depends on how you feel about this draft and how you feel about Kennard. And I'm not very high on the draft because all the people who tell me I shouldn't be, they tell me I shouldn't be. So I'm not, I don't really watch college basketball that much. With Kennard, it's just, I haven't seen a ton to make me feel super, super confident that he's going to be a starting level player in this league yet. But that doesn't mean that he's not there. And he is under his rookie deal. It has a lot of, team has control. So I'm not necessarily high on the that Porter trade that I just threw out there, but I think it's something that, you throw it up there, it might actually work, but it also might just be a complete failure.
Wait, so David, I'm not sure if we got an answer from you earlier in terms of if you would like to be a buyer, a seller, or just stand pat.
I think stand pat in the sense of I want to keep Andre Drummond this season. I want to kind of see what they can do with I think they have the second or third easiest, or they have like a top 5 easiest schedule remaining for the rest of the year. Now I know, Steve, you brought up a point to me that might be a little misleading because there's not a ton of teams that you put on paper that you can guarantee that the Pistons are going to win against. So, but I still think that they are going to play a little bit better as we approach these final couple months. But I do think that the Pistons should be looking to move on from Stanley Johnson. I don't think that you just walk away from a Reggie Bullock deal if it's favorable and it helps you out in the future. Ish Smith, the same for them. So I think those three guys, I wouldn't be torn if they traded him, but I don't know. Is that stand pat or is that selling? I guess that's more selling with Bullock because he's a starter. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think the whole like label's pretty arbitrary and simplistic, but I guess it would be selling. But I'm totally with you on those ideas, though.
Yeah, I think that's what they should do because I think at the end of the day that it's going to be a shame that you don't literally get anything for Stanley Johnson because you're not going to bring him back. He doesn't fit on this team. You might as well get something. The same thing with Bullock. You're probably not going to be able to bring him back, so you might as well see if you can make a move. I don't think Bullock gets dealt though. I think he's on the team after the trade deadline, just because he's so important to this team to winning games, and I think Tom Gores wants to win games. So I don't really have anything else, guys. I don't know if anybody else has anything. Steve, do you have any other articles coming up that you want to plug, or you want to tell people where they can follow you on Twitter and all that good stuff?
After we get through the trade deadline, it always starts turning to the NBA draft. And one guy who I've been a fan of this entire draft season, I'm totally on the this draft isn't very good train, but I do think that there will be some sneaky good players who come later out of it. And Brandon Clark is one of my favorite players in this draft class, and I think he'd be fantastic next to Blake Griffin. He would be this super fun, like hybrid player who is just this defensive stalwart who does what Bruce Brown does for Reggie Jackson at the point guard position. Like, did you guys see those clips I posted today on Twitter?
I saw the block from Brown today. It was incredible.
Yeah, no, it was ridiculous. And so, Blake Griffin, he does a nice job drawing the charges, but he is not really going to be protecting the rim. And so, he would be the enforcer next to Blake Griffin down low that Bruce Brown has been for Reggie Jackson. And the thing I really like about him is I think he could play either center, or if we wanted to have a real center in place, that he could kind of be a small forward playing next to Blake Griffin and a legit center. So at some point I'm going to I'll put something together about my love for Brandon Clark and
out of where?
Gonzaga.
Okay. Well, cool. Well, we'll keep an eye out for your draft stuff, and yeah, let people know where they can find you and all of your work. And if you don't follow Steve now, I think that you definitely should. He's definitely one of the more, in my opinion, one of the better writers at Detroit Bad Boys. There's a lot of good writers there, but sometimes your work I just get like entranced in it. I think you've written some of the best articles this year, so I think people should be following you for sure.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. My Twitter is Shinons8, SHINONS8, and also, I do a lot of running and climbing stuff. So this weekend I actually have a bouldering competition in Maryland. So you want to follow that stuff? I do it more on Instagram. That's Hinson72.
Cool. I'll follow you on Instagram. I know that you are a. Oh yeah, and you're coming to Boston next year this upcoming year for the Boston Marathon. So congrats on that. That's awesome.
Oh, thanks, man. Yeah, ran it last year. Hopefully better weather this year.
Oh, it was awful last year. Super cold. But yeah, we'll definitely grab a beer when you're in town. And yeah, man, thank you so much for coming on.
Hell yeah. Yeah, it's been fun.
Cool, man. And Joey Mack, he's been hiding in the shadows a little bit on Twitter, but just give it to him. just drop it. Just drop that tweet handle.
I haven't logged into Twitter in 2019. That's just like kind of like I was spending too much time on it in 2018, so I decided to go back a little bit.
Reggie Bullock has been traded.
Wow.
Oh my gosh.
To the Lakers. So we're still going to post this, guys. So don't worry. But they are trading Svetoslav. I cannot pronounce his last name. Mykhaliuk. I've seen him play. But
From
yeah,
Kansas.
I think so. I'm not sure. I don't know. So yeah, Reggie Bullock has been traded. So I am wrong, officially wrong. Holy shit. Well,
Yeah.
I could not have been more wrong. Any takeaways on that, guys?
I'm curious as is just saying a draft pick is first round pick or what's going on there.
Oh, and a draft pick. Yeah, I don't know what the pick is. Wow. After a game.
You know, we used to, back in the old days of DBB, Aaron Aflalo was nicknamed Spellcheck. We might need to reallocate that nickname because this guy, I don't even know how to pronounce it. I'm never going to learn how to spell this thing.
No. So in his, I don't, you can, so it's Svitat Uslav Mukiluk. Mukiluk. Sorry, I'm just going off the pronunciation here.
Yeah.
Basketball reference. And just for some numbers, which is breaking my heart. 38 games this year, 3.2 points, 0.8 rebounds, 0.8 assists, 33% from the field, 32% from three, and he's playing roughly how many minutes per game? Where is it at? Shit, I want the minutes per game.
10.7.
10.7 minutes per game. Well,
our problem at small forward is obviously solved now.
for damn sure. I'm not that upset. I wanted to move Bullock for a pick. We got a pick. I'm hoping it's a first rounder. Definitely, because this is just a straight player for player. This ain't it. But
well, I mean, so one nice thing, he shot 44% from three his last year at Kansas. Started playing at Kansas, I guess, at age 17. That's interesting. But hopefully that's a first round pick.
I'm hoping that's a first round pick too, because I have to imagine that there were some other trades out there. You know, I was kind of looking at this once the Anthony Davis stuff disintegrated earlier today, and then you see the Reggie Bullock stuff tied to LA. So I mean, he's going to be great in LA. They definitely need 3-point shooting there. Joe, what's your takeaway from this?
Well, ideally it's a first round pick. I have a feeling that it's not.
Yeah, I don't think so.
I mean, you know, it's hard to really look into his numbers too much this year for the Lakers because they have so many other guys who are going to be ball dominant in shooting the ball. So he's the last option all of the times that he's on the floor. I think that he's a shooter. To me, based on the small sample size in which I saw him play at Kansas, he's kind of like a Luke Kennard.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's not the worst thing in the sense of you get a pick, you get a rookie under a rookie deal, so you aren't, you're not shooting yourself in the foot. You are also getting another asset, which this team desperately needs. They pretty much traded away all their second round picks for the foreseeable future. I know they have their one this year, but I mean, I would love for this to be a first round pick, but I also don't think that that's going to be it. But who knows?
For what it's worth, he put up 47 points in a G League outing about a month ago. On 16 of 23 shooting.
Jordan McRae scored like 85 points in a G League game, so I don't really want to go too much down the G League hole, but he is a rookie. I'll give him that. Hey, well, at least we saw this just now. We have at least a light reaction. I can at least throw that into the description of this podcast. So I don't want to take up too much more of your times.
We didn't get Joe's Twitter handle, though.
Yeah, I was going to say that also. My handle. Yeah, so I haven't been too active on Twitter. Again, it was a situation in which I tried to cut back on the amount of time that I was spending on Twitter. So I haven't dropped a tweet bomb in far too long. But if shoot me a follow, I'll be back on one of these days, sooner rather than later. J.Mack, that's JDOTMACK.
And I'm at the Fernantula. This is Inside the Cylinder. You can find us on Inside the CYLNDR. Our guest, Steve, thank you so much for all your time today. And I'll see you in the group chat.
Sounds good. See you guys later.
Peace, guys.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna hit the stop broadcast button. So